We are summoned here to make decisions which bind our authority for time to come. Let us do so in an atmosphere of dignity, goodwill, respect and calm. May those decisions be just and fair and in the long-term best interests of the people who live and work in our beautiful county of Dorset. Okay, welcome to our annual meeting of the council, and we'll start off with item number 1, which is the election of the chairman. Do we have any nominations, please? Councillor Batstone.
I'm pleased to nominate Councillor Val Pothecary as chairman of this council for the coming year. She's carried out the role with dignity and composure in some difficult situations in the past year, and it would be good for her to have the opportunity to represent us publicly free of our COVID restrictions in the coming year. I know she's going to be a busy lady because I understand she also has a Ukrainian family who've recently moved in with her. So I have every pleasure in proposing Val for chairman for the coming year.
Thank you very much, Councillor Batson. Do I have a seconder for that proposal? Councillor Coombs.
Thank you very much, Chairman. In the chair. Very happy to support the nomination. I've known Val for quite a while from the previous councils, and she has done a very good job the last term, and I fully support this nomination.
Thank you. Councillor Ireland.
Thank you, Councillor Cox. I'd like to nominate Councillor Beryl Azad for the position of chairman of this council. Councillor Azad is a very experienced councillor who passionately represented the residents of Worham and surrounding parishes for 16 years prior to the demise of Purbeck District Council. And she was also a Dorset County Councillor for the last 6 years of that authority. In 2019, she was elected to the Worham ward of Dorset Council with a huge majority, and she's also a Worham Town Councillor. Councillor Azad has previously been a portfolio holder for transport and housing at Purbeck and held many other posts, in particular related to her interests and focus on social care and health. She's also currently a partner governor to Dorset University's hospitals, UHD, I believe they're called these days. Appropriately, given that it's only 4 days shy of 3 years ago, when I proposed that this council, seconded by my good friend here, Councillor Paul Kimber, that we recognise that climate change is happening and declare a climate emergency, Councillor Azad has been an early and earnest adopter of renewable technologies, with photovoltaic panels on her house, and she also drives a Nissan Leaf battery vehicle. When elected, you can count on Councillor Azad to act with equality, integrity and fairness, ensuring the opinions of all members are allowed to be heard at council. I commend her to this chamber. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ireland. Do we have a seconder for that proposal? Councillor Rowe.
Councillor Rowe. I would like to second Councillor Azad, who brings not only experience and wisdom, but enthusiasm to the position. Her passion and dedication for everything that she does shines through. Amongst her many qualities, one that I value in particular is that she doesn't just talk about things. She puts hard work and effort into everything she does, and she makes a real difference and improves people's lives. I commend her to this chamber.
Thank you, Councillor Rowe. Do we have any other nominations? Councillor Kimber.
Just for information, this year, as there quite rightly there is a democratic decision to be made, I will not be standing this year.
Thank you, Paul, and thank you for being so gracious over that. So we do have 2 nominations, and I'll leave it over to Susan now to prepare the vote.
Yeah, the vote is now open. Thank you. Councillor Pipe, just waiting for your vote, please. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. The vote's now closed. The results of the vote are 44 votes in favour of Councillor Val Apothecary, 29 votes in favour of Councillor Beryl Azad. Therefore, Councillor Apothecary has been elected Chairman of Council.
Thank you. I, Councillor Val Apothecary, having been elected to the office of Chairman of Dorset Council, declare that I take the said office upon myself and will duly and faithfully fulfil the duties of it according to the best of my judgment and ability. I undertake to observe the code as to the conduct which is expected of councillors of Dorset Council. Thank you. Can't even write, I'm shaky. Okay. Thank you. It's nice to be tall, isn't it? Congratulations. Thank you, darling. Thank you. Right. Shall I sign these now or what are they? Sorry. They're sort of in the way there. Excuse the delay, I'm just trying to organise myself. Yes. I would just like to say a few words. Thank you for your support in re-electing me to the office of Chairman of Council. It's a huge honour and a privilege, and I'm very grateful. Before I continue, I would like to thank Councillor Mike Parks for his staunch support over recent months, and also Susan Dallison and the team from Democratic Services, headed up by Jonathan Mayer, for ensuring that our meetings run smoothly. On a personal level, I'm extremely grateful to my PA, Judy Saunders, who does a really brilliant job in looking after my diary, and to my partner and consort, Graham Azad, whose commitment to supporting my role as chairman has been unstinting. Thank you. It's been a funny old year, as the saying goes. Obviously, all our council meetings except one were held online, and we've only recently resumed civic events, so life has gone from the occasional flag raising to a plethora of invitations taking place most weekends. Many of you will have noticed how shabby and downright embarrassing the War Memorial area is at County Hall. And for several months I've been trying to get the area renovated. I'm really pleased to say that I'm now working on a project with Officer Bridget Betts, and work will start on the 20th of June to completely refurbish it. We will also have a new memorial to frontline workers who lost their lives in the call of duty for the COVID pandemic. It is hoped that the work will be completed by the end of July and will be a fitting memorial for our council. If anyone would like to see our plans, please let me know and I'll forward them on. A lot of my focus has been on the Queen's Jubilee celebrations. You will remember that I planted an English oak at County Hall last November, and I've been actively encouraging our towns and parishes to plant trees for the Queen's Green Canopy project. We will be lighting the beacon at Durlston on the evening of the 2nd of June. And of course, you've all been invited to a Dorset Civic Service of Celebration at Sherborne Abbey on the 3rd of June. Invitations were sent out some weeks ago, and I would please ask those of you yet to respond to give this matter your attention. Councillor Parkes and I have discussed and agreed proposed criteria for Honorary Freeman of Dorset Awards, ready for the end of our elected term. Our ideas now need to be approved by all party leaders before going forward to audit and governance in June. Following up on an idea of Councillor O'Leary for Dorset Council neckties, I've organised and paid for lapel badges for members. You should all have one in front of you. I think they're quite smart and eye-catching in the shape of the Dorset D. And the added benefit is, of course, that women can wear them as well. They weren't supposed to be a bribe, actually. I had ordered them weeks and weeks ago, and they only showed up this week. So there's no need to tell you about my style of chairmanship. You all know that by now. Suffice it to say that I consider the role of chairman as the conscience of the council. And of course, the representative not only of the members, but all of our officers and staff too. Over the months, I've tried hard to build bridges with our towns and parishes and reduce the divide from the hitherto three-tier system. My reason for wanting to be elected to Dorset Council in the very first place was to have a hand in developing the ethos and values of the new council. I also wanted to ensure that we were truly member-led, not officer-led, as I feel had been the case at Dorset County Council. Of course, this means that members must also lead by example and set appropriate standards in their behaviours and attitudes. That's why I'm strict and a bit bossy. It really does matter to me that Dorset Council is respected for the amazing work it does on our residents' behalf and has a good reputation. I will do my very best to protect that reputation, and I really hope that I can rely on you all to join me. Thank you. Okay. I hope the box is still here. It is, all right. The next item on the agenda, item 2, is the election of the Vice Chairman. And I would like to ask for nominations for Vice Chairman. To start things off, I would like myself to nominate Councillor Barry Gorringe. Barry and I met in a past life when I was Chairman of North Dorset District, and he was Vice Chairman, I believe, of East Dorset District Council. We got on so well, and I was really impressed with the way he presented himself and the council that he represented. And so I'm very, very pleased to propose Councillor Barry Gorringe. I believe this proposal will be seconded by Councillor David Shortall.
Barry Gorringe for Vice Chairman of the Council. I've known Barry professionally and socially for many years and found him a very solid and reliable person. Dedicated to Dorset Council, of course, and dedicated to the work that he does. I believe in this instance it is a very suited person to occupy the role of Vice Chairman. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Shortall. Do we have any other nominations? Sorry. Councillor Sutton.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to nominate Councillor Les Frye. Having scratched the surface, metaphorically, of course, that is, I find that Les is not a blue or a yellow or even a green independent. He's a true independent and is highly respected all across the chamber and would therefore make an excellent chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sutton. Do we have a seconder? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm happy to second Councillor Frye's nomination to the post of Vice Chairman. He's a person of considerable standing in the community, and he recently received the British Empire Medal in recognition of his public and charitable works. And as Councillor Sutton, my colleague, has said, as an independent councillor, he has no political baggage with him, and I'm sure he can carry out the role without favour. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. So, any other nominations, please? No. So we will now go to the vote, please.
The vote is now open. Yep, thank you everyone. The vote's now closed. The results of the vote are 40 votes in favour of Councillor Barry Gorringe, 31 votes in favour of Councillor Les Frye and 2 abstentions. Councillor Barry Gorringe has been elected to Vice Chairman of Council.
Having been elected to the office of Vice Chairman of Dorset Council, declare that I take the said office upon myself and will duly and faithfully fulfil the duties of it according to the best of my judgment and ability. I undertake to observe the code as the code of conduct which is expected of councillors of Dorset Council.
Pass me the ribbon, I'll put it on. Because I'm not there.
I'd just like to say that thank you those councillors who have supported me, and whilst in office I will endeavour to carry out the duties to the best of my ability of Vice Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gorringe. We now move to agenda item 3, apologies.
Apologies for absence have been received from Councillor Graham Carr-Jones, Councillor Janet Dover, Councillor John Andrews, Councillor David Gray, Councillor Andy Canning, Councillor Dave Bolwell and Councillor Mike Dyer.
Thank you, Sue. Agenda item 4 is the minutes. Excuse me. If there are no matters to raise on accuracy, I will confirm the minutes of the meeting held on the 14th of April 2022 as a correct record. Okay. Agenda item 5 is declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest, please? I'll get used to this button over time, I'm sure. So we are now on to Chairman's announcements. Unfortunately, we heard yesterday of the very recent death of former Councillor John Russell, who was a valued member of West Dorset District Council for many years. No funeral details are known at this time, but they will be circulated. On behalf of members and officers, we offer our deepest condolences to John's family. On a happier note, Councillor Bill Pipe, having been recognised nationally for his work within the community of Litchett Minster and Upton, Hamworthy and Creekmore, has been selected to attend Her Majesty's Platinum Jubilee Garden Party at Buckingham Palace next week. I'm sure you'll enjoy that, Councillor Pipe. Agenda item 7 is the election of leader. I would like to ask for nominations for leader of the council.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to nominate Spencer Flower to lead us in the forthcoming year. Spencer has done a quite amazing job under very difficult circumstances. We have worked together to try and work with all the people in this chamber and to try and put wherever we can party difference aside. And I think it's important to maintain that consistency and to work forward in the interests of Dorset. So I am absolutely delighted to be able to nominate Spencer for a further year. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wolfe. Do we have a seconder, please? Councillor Barry. Thank you. Do we have any further proposals for leader of the council? Thank you very much. Yes, I will ask Councillor Spencer Flower to say a few words. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chairman, and thank you, colleagues, for showing your faith in me for a further year. I'm not going to say much at this point because I've got quite a lot to say and the leader's announcements, but thank you all very much once again.
Thank you, Councillor Flower. Agenda item 8 is the appointment of Deputy Leader and Cabinet. And I will ask the Leader of Council to confirm the following appointments: Deputy Leader, members of the Cabinet and lead members. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I'm pleased to report there are no changes at this time to the current incumbents. Thank you.
Thank you. Agenda item 9 is announcements and reports from the Leader.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Well, I've been long awaiting the opportunity to share with colleagues across this chamber a piece of work that I started in January. I drafted a mission statement because I felt that if everything's a priority, then nothing is. We had a good, solid Dorset plan, but we needed to pull out of it some of the key priorities that face this council, certainly in the next 2 years and probably beyond that. So I also felt that having got a mission statement on a piece of paper, 10 priorities came out of it, that we ought to make sure that those priorities sit really clearly next to, as I said, the Dorset plan, more importantly, get embedded in the policies of this council. And I'll come on to that towards the end. But I wanted that this will all be set out in my bulletin, along with a comment I've made about the Ukrainian crisis, because I think it's important that we keep that focus on the situation, the terrible situation in Ukraine. The important thing for me is that we've made huge progress in the first 3 years of this council And we've still got huge challenges facing us going forward. And I thought it was important, that we did focus on the key issues that gets the best outcomes for the people of Dorset. And you've heard me say that many times. I talk about being bold and ambitious, and I believe we've been bold and ambitious. And I think we need to continue with that challenge, that desire to get a better outcome for the folk that we represent. So I'm going to just quickly run through some of the things that I felt we should focus on, bearing in mind there's a lot of stuff that's business as usual that we focus on anyway, but these are the key things that I felt that we should certainly have a conversation around and focus our mind on. The housing, we start off with the Dorset local plan. You've heard me speak a lot in recent months, Chairman, about the importance of ensuring that whatever local plan we end up with, it's one that fits the needs and aspirations of the people of Dorset. And I felt, and I believe that's a view shared by many, both in this chamber and also in the community, that the current standard methodology was driving us towards housing numbers rather than focusing on the real needs of the people of Dorset. And I've challenged that. You know that. I've spoken to you before about having conversations with the Secretary of State and subsequent conversations, and we hopefully get another opportunity in early June to further that conversation. And we've seen, although I haven't had a chance to look at it yet, in the Queen's speech of yesterday, some quite radical changes to planning, and I'm hopeful that those fit a little bit with what our aspirations are here. That's a key priority. None of these aren't in priority order. There are 10 we've identified. They're not in a scale of, in any order. Housing for local people. I mean, we talk an awful lot about the need to look after the young people of this county who want to stay, work and live and bring a family up in Dorset. We need to look after those that find themselves, unfortunately, homeless. And what can we do about that? And we've done a lot of work. We've got, in Dorset, we haven't got a stock. We don't own a stock of property. That's the registered providers do that. Stock transfers took place years ago with the boroughs and district councils in Dorset. And I think that will continue. But it's interesting. I asked for some statistics. And I asked the other day how many affordable housing units have been built and developed in the last year. And they said, well, the target was 400. And we've heard comments about how many we're doing, we're not doing enough. We actually delivered 529. I think that's incredibly good. But there's obviously still more we can do. But the area that I wanted this council to focus on was a temporary accommodation for those who find themselves, unfortunately, homeless. And we want to try and avoid people going into B&B. It's an awful solution, particularly for young families. And the more we can do as a council to deal with that problem, the better. And we've already got a programme in place where we're trying to develop on an investor-saved basis. It gets a better outcome for the people that need our support, and it enables this council to. I want to see no B&B. That's my aspiration. I hope it's one that's shared by members in this chamber. I'll speak a bit louder in a minute if I need to. Adult social care, massive. I've only got 2 lines on here. That doesn't undervalue the importance of adult social care and the challenges that we've got facing us. Do I need to be closer to it? Right, that might help. Thank you very much, Susan. Adult social care, an area that we all know is the highest spending service in this council. It's the one with the biggest challenges coming down the track. There's a huge amount of work to be done on that. Children's services, we've already heard Andrew Parry talk about the work we've done with the Invest Save for our youngsters who need special support from us. We're doing a huge amount of work there. The investment in Coombe House, as it used to be called St Mary's, but the investment in Coombe House and other facilities across Dorset is a huge piece of work, and we need to continue that at pace because it does get the best outcomes for our young people. I want to focus also on assets and property. Now, we've inherited a huge estate. We don't need it all. We either dispose of it or we repurpose it so we can reduce our costs of business rate and maintenance, and we can get some income out of if we're able to repurpose some of it. So a huge piece of work there to underpin the key services of the council. The other thing that's coming out loud and clear now is the integrated care system. I've been heavily involved in the last few months talking to colleagues in the NHS and others around how we can get the best outcomes for the people of Dorset. It can't be the CCG rebadged. It has to be something more radical. And I'm pleased to say all the signs that those of us that have been involved in this, in conversations with the NHS, is it isn't a rebadged CCG. There's a real intent to get place, which is the thing we're responsible for, high on the agenda. Early intervention keeps people away from critical beds, that sort of thing. So there's a huge amount of work going on with that. Climate and ecological strategy, we've got one of those, and we're delivering on it. And I won't go into that tonight. I think there's a lot been said about it. We know what we're doing. We've got government funding. We're delivering that government funding through the work that Ray and the team have been doing. Huge amount of work there. And we've recently got a corporate director for climate, dealing with the climate. I think he started on Monday, didn't he? So we've done something else we said we'd do. So huge amount of work there. High, again, one of the key priorities of this council. Community safety. The one thing I will say, we've had really strong dialogue with the PCC in Dorset in the last year or so. Huge difference in attitude, wanting to work with local authorities to make a difference with community safety. So that, I think, is got to be high on the agenda. County deal, you heard me talk about a county deal only, I think, the last meeting. An opportunity for us to get together with a partner, probably BCP. We're in conversation for a pan-Dorset county deal to bring in huge investment from opportunities from government. Cornwall have just done it. Cornwall got £60 million for infrastructure investment. That's the sort of money we want. In fact, we want more than that. We've been poorly served by all successive governments when it comes to proper infrastructure investment in Dorset. Another key priority. And last but by no means least, digital innovation. Huge amount of work been done. Much more needs to be done to get the best out of that, because it helps with business and commerce and us individually. If we get it right, get the connectivity right, it'll help the long-term economic development of Dorset. So that's the 10th key priority. So, going to get it, I said earlier on, going to get it embedded in council policy. So let's just turn to what that looks like. So the next steps, draft, refresh version of Dorset plan to place and resources on the 7th of June, and then People and Health Overview Committee on the 28th of June. Then it comes to Cabinet, I think 26th of July, and then obviously post-Cabinet, the usual key work that scrutiny will do in looking at performance to making sure that we stay in line with what we said we'd do, Chairman. And that's really all I want to say tonight. But this is the beginning, I believe, of a refocus on the key priorities this council need to drive forward in the next 2 years and beyond. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Leader, for a very interesting forward look at the direction we're going. Before I go any further, I would just like to advise members that the protesters have let off a smoke bomb outside, and so we've had to close the windows upstairs to stop the smoke alarms going off. Okay. First off, I think I have Councillor Jones to ask a question, and then... Okay, let's get a list going. Have you made a list for me?
Thank you very much, Chair. First of all, I just want to say for the record, everybody here, we are here to do the very best for the people we serve. And I'm just really distressed to hear that rabble outside, to smell the smoke. And it's just, we're not here for that. And if these people could actually see what we're actually trying to do. Today, in the pantry, I had 3 homeless people, one of them aged 17. That's what I'm here to do, not to deal with that. And actually, they're not even that interested in climate change, my people. They're here. They worry about the cost of living. And I just wonder whether, I know we're doing very well in terms of the energy that we produce. We're one of the top performing councils in the UK for regenerating energy. I just would love to see us be very bold in that respect and see what we can retain in Dorset for our own residents to reduce the cost of living. And that's something that I hope we can work to and aspire to. And I'm just disgusted at some of the people we represent, quite frankly. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. Next up, we have Councillor Kimber. Sorry.
Thank you very much, Chair, and congratulations on your re-elections. And I was particularly interested in when you said you're building a remembrance over the last 2 years for the people, our own workers that have been unfortunately died of the COVID. Turning to the Chair of the Council, I welcome the Leader of the Council, sorry Leader. I welcome the 529 affordable houses, naturally, and I personally want to see more. For the Council, like many of you, I run a councillor's surgery, and I can say categorically, housing issues are the number one. And I'll tell you this story. I had a young family come and see me, and the husband works 6 days, 12 hours a week, and the wife works around 3 jobs, one in the hospital, and they still cannot afford a home at the age of 40, which is sad reflection. So I'm right with you that we've got to do more for housing and housing our young people. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Kimber. Councillor Ireland.
Thank you, Chairman. I was pleased to hear the Leader, I have a question on the actual Leader's statement. I was pleased to hear the Leader acknowledge the fact that we have a desperate need for housing for local people, affordable housing. And my question is, how does he intend to deliver that? Is that through this council, either through a third-party spun-off housing development company or even building itself? Are we going to build houses at affordable rent for our residents? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Nick will recall, I mentioned registered providers. All the housing stock that used to be social housing in Dorset was transferred many years ago. I think they have the ability to raise funds on more than we would. They've got all the mechanisms, all the experience and so on. They've got the infrastructure to deliver. And one of the things that, sadly, Graham can't be with us tonight, but one of the things that he and I are working on with officers is creating a stronger bond between the registered providers who provide housing in Dorset and the aspirations that I think we all share in this chamber about trying to get a larger number of social housing out there, whether it's social housing to rent, whether it's shared equity or what it is. It's a piece of work we're working on now, and I know that, because I've seen the report, it's only in draft form at the moment, Nick, but it very much fits in with the point you've made. I don't see any aspiration for us being stockholders of general needs housing, certainly for housing for those that, temporary accommodation. There's a market for that. Registered providers are not that keen on doing that type of work. We have a role to play in that, and I think there's a key role. So it's a balance between the registered providers and this council dealing with the short-term problems of those who find themselves homeless.
Yes, you may.
Thank you. I just wonder if the Leader might want to comment on the rumours that have been circulating recently that the government are likely to introduce a right to buy for registered providers. Because if that is the case, registered providers will not be building houses. And there are ways through this council of actually building houses through various mechanisms, legal ways of actually stopping right to buy.
Thank you for that question, Nick. It's a good question because I heard about it the other day and I was asked my opinion and I gave my opinion. I didn't think that it might have been right once. I'm not convinced that it's necessary. The principle might be fine, but I think there needs to be an understanding about how it operates. And I think there's a good piece more work being done by government. They might have made a headline announcement about the potential for that to happen, but we haven't got the detail of that at the moment. But I'll take the point on board, and we'll have a look and see what the detail looks like later. Okay.
Thank you, Councillor Ireland. Councillor O'Leary.
Thank you, Chairman. As the youngest member of this body, to one of the more senior members of this body, the leader, he gets a tremendous amount of criticism from some quarters, but all I want to say as a member of, also a backbench member of this council, someone who's not on cabinet, that we're very lucky to have someone like him battling for Dorset, and he's recently shown very strong leadership in the face of tough challenges, whether it be from the last meeting or for COVID. And I think we all just want to say thank you to the tremendous work you've put in and the strong leadership you've given all of us, and long may it continue.
Did you have a question, Councillor O'Leary? Or were you just... Would you like to say, and wouldn't the council all agree with me? Thank you. Councillor Lacey-Clark.
Thank you, Chairman. I actually don't have a question. I'll be forefront with that straight away. I'm really struggling to hear a lot. Some people, like Councillor Louis, have very booming voices. Some don't. Could I ask, maybe today, for this one meeting, we remain sat with the microphones in front of us? Because when some people are speaking, I just cannot hear them. And I'm probably not the only deaf person in the room, judging from the demographics.
I think we will all take your point, Councillor Lacey-Clark, and certainly everyone is allowed to stay seated, whatever the demographic. Thank you. Do we have any more questions for the leader? Okay, thank you. So we're moving on now to agenda item 10, public participation questions and statements. I'm going to do my very best to ensure that 3 minutes is adhered to. We have 7 questions and responses today. And for the sake of everybody here, I'm going to try and time on my... Everybody will know that I'm not very technical, but I'm going to try and time on my telephone 3 minutes, and you might be rudely interrupted, is all I'm going to say. I beg your pardon. Thank you. To assist us, we have asked actually the questioners to only read the question rather than the rather long preamble in lots of instances. So I'm going to ask question number 1 from Alistair Chisholm will be read out by Neil Matthews.
Can you hear me, folks? Yes. Thank you very much. Chairman, Vice Chairman, Leader, congratulations on your new appointments. Yes, as some of you will know, Alistair Chisholm, I am not he, but I'm representing him as I'm also a member of STAND. In an email dated 28th of April 2022, written to all those invited to the second highest master planning workshop for the North Dorchester Garden community, Wessex Water stated the following. 1, we are still not satisfied that risks to Eagle Lodge, a major strategic public drinking water supply source, can be mitigated. And 2, major development in a source protection zone can result in significant water quality deterioration in the aquifer. Serious pollution may render the source unusable. And 3, significant investment is likely to be required to serve the site, including new service reservoirs. My question is, in view of these damning comments and the massive costs involved in providing suitable mitigation measures to ensure the continued supply of healthy water to the town, why is the council continuing to spend public money on the Door 13 site, which is clearly and fundamentally flawed? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Matthews. We will receive a response from Councillor David Walsh.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chairman, and congratulations on your reappointment. I'm Councillor David Welsh, portfolio holder for Planning, Dorset Council. I'm also one of the 3 members for the Gillingham ward. Thank you for the question. Any major proposed development will have substantial issues that need to be resolved before it can be approved. This is an important part of devising the plan as we work with key stakeholders to identify challenges and look to address concerns. The Council has yet to endorse any specific aspects of the local plan and would not do so until asked to support the final draft for submission to the Secretary of State. However, all decisions need to be supported by the appropriate evidence, and we will continue to work with Wessex Water in investigating the issues that they have raised. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Walsh. Okay. We have question 2 submitted by Rob Pearce. Please.
Madam Chair, Dorset Councillors, Dorset Equality Group's question is to ask what progress is being made in implementing the real living wage as the baseline Dorset Council staff employment rate. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Pearce. We will receive a response from Councillor Jill Haynes.
Thank you, Chairman. Councillor Jill Haynes. I have a portfolio for corporate development and transformation, and I also represent the Chalk Valleys ward. And while I'm here, I'd like to add my congratulations to your reappointment as well. The response, thank you, Mr. Pearce, for your question. The response is as follows. The majority of Dorset Council pay rates are set through national pay bargaining. The national local government employers are seeking to increase the lowest pay point over a period to achieve the real living wage. As the Council is committed to the national bargaining, then it is right that we support the national employers in their endeavours. The pace of Dorset's council movement towards the real living wage will therefore be determined through national negotiations. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Haynes. Next, we receive a question from, 2 questions actually, from Sandra Reeve to be read out by Giles Watts.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I've been asked not to read the statement associated with these 2 questions, but I'd just like to say that it concerns the energy security debate which took place on the 14th of April, or didn't take place. It was resolved behind closed doors. And I'd just like to say that this concerns the democratic processes in this chamber, and it's really important that they should be seen to be fair to everybody. Thank you. The 2 questions are, question 1, will the Chair please give their reasons for moving to an immediate vote on Agenda 13 without debate, rather than adjourning the vote to another occasion, which they could have chosen to do? And the second question is, we do hope Dorset Council agrees with that our energy and climate security is important enough to require a proper public debate, and if so, will the Council bring the motion back in the future to a future meeting, as this appears to be the most equitable way forward? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Watts. I will give you personally a response to both questions. In the introduction to their questions, Dorset Climate Action Network merely note the actions by 2 protesters who disrupted the last full council meeting, and then they go on to criticise the council for what they say was a failing to respect the principles of democracy. noting the actions of the protesters is not good enough. What the protesters did was a deliberate attempt to prevent a democratic vote from taking place. It resulted, quiet please, it resulted in disruption to our meeting. It resulted in the police having to be called out, and is now resulting in council taxpayers having to meet the cost of additional security measures for our meetings tonight and in the future. The question describes the vote as having been taken place behind closed doors. That is absolutely not true. The disruption by the protesters meant that we had to reconvene in a different room, but I did not restart the meeting until members of the public were present, as we are obliged to do. In fact, it was the very presence of the 3 members of the public that influenced my decision. They had been in the gallery with the 2 protesters that had appeared in the chamber. And having just witnessed such an extraordinary event, I was most concerned that no further incidents occurred. Who knew what might still happen? We read all sorts of things in the newspapers. Unfortunately, for people in our position, sometimes they've lost their lives through people's behaviour. So what I'm saying is there was real concern, and I know several members were actually in shock about it. So for reasons of members' and officers' safety, I took the decision to forego the usual debate and move straight to a vote. Yes, I could have adjourned the meeting, but I didn't want to wish the protesters the success in preventing a democratic vote from taking place. I was supported in my decision by both the Chief Executive and the monitoring officer. Debate was curtailed because of the actions of the protesters, but my decision was to ensure that a democratic took place on an item that was included on our agenda to be decided that evening. Second question. Questions, answers, motions and updates relating to climate change feature regularly on our agendas, and I expect that will continue. The leader's motion to our last meeting was agreed, and it stands now as a decision of the council and has been enacted. Thank you for your questions. Question 5 is a question from Kaz Dennett. Actually, there are 2 questions, Kaz, aren't there? Did you want to read them simultaneously or? Absolutely.
That's it. Okay. Good evening. On the 4th of April 2022, UN General Secretary Antonio Guterres said, "We are on a pathway to a global warming of more than double the 1.5 degrees Celsius limit agreed in Paris. Some government and business leaders are saying one thing, but doing another. Simply put, they are lying, and the results will be catastrophic because this is a climate emergency. Climate scientists warn that we are already perilously close to tipping points that could lead to cascading and irreversible climate impacts. But high-emitting governments and corporations are not just turning a blind eye, they are adding fuel to the flames. They are choking our planet based on their vested interests and historic investments in fossil fuels, when cheaper renewable solutions provide green jobs, energy security, and greater price stability. Climate activists are sometimes depicted as dangerous radicals, but the truly dangerous radicals are those that are increasing the production of fossil fuels, including here in the UK. Investing in new fossil fuels infrastructure is moral and economic madness. We must triple the speed of the shift to renewable energy, and leaders must lead on this. Regardless if you live in a big city, a rural area, or a small island state, if you invest in the stock market, if you care about justice and our children's future, demand an end to fossil fuels. So my question, is Antonio Guterres, the United Nations, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, and actually the International Energy Agency, Are they wrong to say we must prevent all new gas and oil extraction and production, including here in Dorset?
Absolutely.
Kaz, would you like an answer to that question before answering your second? Okay, thank you. Councillor Ray Bryan, please.
Madam Chairman, the response I'm going to give governs both questions together. So I'd ask Kaz Dennis if she would read her second question as well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So question 2, 3 years ago, Dorset Council declared we are in a climate emergency, yet last month passed a motion to support new oil and gas extraction, including here in Dorset, and continues to invest £41 million of our Dorset pension fund in fossil fuels. Does Dorset Council understand that you are saying one thing and doing another, and displaying the moral and economic madness that Mr Guterres refers to? Thank you.
Thank you, Kaz. And you will now receive a response from Councillor Ray Bryan.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I'd like to take the opportunity of congratulating you on your appointment and that of the Vice Chairman and, of course, the Leader. Kaz, you and I know each other quite well. And if I may, I'd like to take the opportunity to answer it as one section. Dorset Council is committed to the leadership required to deliver the aspirations of the climate and ecological strategy, working across multiple systems and partnerships. The Council has significant tools and levers that it can utilise to help us on this journey, but it cannot deliver the change required on its own. As with any change of this scale, there will be, out of necessity, be a period of transition where energy, transport and other key systems decarbonise, and wider behavioural change reduces our environmental impact. Reducing the discussion to a simple binary set of choices minimises the scale and the scope of the challenges that we all face within society. We're all facing a huge challenge to make the necessary changes, and therefore I have committed to continued dialogue with government and other key partners and communities to investigate how we can remove barriers and empower councils like Dorset to make decisions on their energy needs. I have always been open for dialogue on how we can work on accelerating the transition and concrete ideas that are cognizant of the complexity of delivering on our aspirations, that understand the role of local government, are always welcome. Dorset Council has delegated its responsibility as an administering authority for the Local Government Pension Scheme, LGPS, to the Pension Fund Committee, which has a duty to scheme members and their employers to ensure that the contributions they pay into the pension fund are invested appropriately to make returns sufficient to meet the fund's obligations to pay pensions and other benefits. In September 2020, and I was a member of the committee at that stage, the Pension Fund Committee agreed a strategy not to divest completely from companies involved in the sourcing and refining of fossil fuels, but instead to seek to reduce investment in all high-carbon emitting companies and to influence the demand for fossil fuels and their financing, not just their supply. Significant decarbonisation has been and will continue to be achieved through the transition of assets to the management of the Brunel Pension Partnership, the pension fund's LGPS investment pooling manager. 10% of the pension fund assets are now invested in Brunel's Sustainable Equities Fund, and all other activity managed Brunel funds are committed to a policy of a 7% year-on-year reduction in their carbon footprint. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you, Councillor Bryan. Thank you. Ms Stennett. We now arrive at our last question, question 7, from Giles Watts.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is a totally different question, so shouldn't be disruptive. In the preamble to my question, I wanted to say a few words about our experience of inviting two lovely Ukrainian families to come and live with us in Dorchester. And I also talked about the support that's been provided by Dorset Council, for which I'd like to say thank you. The question is, we believe Dorset Council is receiving £10,500 from the government for every Ukrainian refugee. Out of this, Ukrainians receive £200 each on a prepaid card, and the host families receive £350 per month. How does Dorset Council intend to spend the remaining funds? And we wondered whether some should go to local schools that take on the refugee children to provide additional staffing and resources, and whether the council would also consider some language classes for both refugees and host families. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your question, Mr. Watts. We will now ask Councillor Laura Miller to respond.
Thank you. Congratulations to everybody. Or everybody's saying it. Goes without saying. But thank you, Mr. Watts, for your question. Thank you for the question because it gives me an opportunity to welcome all our Ukrainian guests. We're proud to have them here with us in Dorset. And thank you to all our hosts, including yourself. I'm genuinely humbled by the wonderful warm welcome that we're giving to our Ukrainian guests by Dorset residents. So we recognise the challenges that people have faced in receiving their visas, share your appreciation of the work that our local MPs have been doing to help address these issues with the Home Office. The support from Dorset Council and our partners, which include Help and Kindness and the Volunteer Centre Dorset, they're undertaking the DBS checks on our behalf, and it's coordinated through our Dorset Together network. I'm really pleased to hear that this is working well. It's a strong multi-agency partnership that continues to respond to questions and emerging needs at both county and a very, very local level. So we're coordinating admissions to schools through our school admissions team. Now, this isn't my territory normally, but I'm heavily involved with the Dorset Together response, so that's why I'm scooping up some of my colleagues' children and education brief in answer to your question. So that's happening through our school's admission team. 27 schools across the county have welcomed children or are in the process of getting those children settled in. We are due to receive funding based on the formula of £10,500 per guest, and that's through guests who are arriving through the Homes for Ukraine scheme. It's being used to deliver the requirements of the Homes for Ukraine scheme in the following ways. So we're undertaking suitability checks for hosts, including accommodation and DBS checks. We're setting up our call centre response and undertaking the administration of payments to our hosts, so all the admin of that. We're making the interim payment to guests. We're also providing guest welfare checks through in-person visits once they've arrived, and that will help us to work out what care and support needs our guests might have and how we can meet those. Also helping them settle if they want to stay here. We know that many really want to go home as soon as they can, as soon as it's safe to do so, but some will want to stay, and so we want to help them settle. We also want to support voluntary and community organisations that are supporting them, and that could take the form of some of those language classes that you've referred to, or social events when our guests are ready. We also need to have a mind to helping guests if the initial accommodations arrangements didn't work out. And I know of only 1 or 2 cases where that's happened, but it is happening. And, you know, we're all human beings, it is going to happen. So we need to have a mind to that. We also need to be very conscious that we support integration. Our guests are arriving from some incredibly traumatic situations and circumstances, and we need to make sure that we provide everything they need. There is a separate funding scheme for schools and early years, and the council has agreed to release this funding as soon as possible to settings as the children arrive. So that's £3,000 per child for early years settings, so that's for children aged 2 to 4 years, £6,580 per child for primary schools, and £8,755 per child for secondary schools. And I hope that's helpful, and I'm always happy to be contacted about Homes for Ukraine because it is a great network of support. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Miller. It's really interesting to hear how much this council is doing and how far it's going and how much appreciated it is, actually. So, agenda item 11 is public participation, petitions and deputations. We haven't received any petitions or deputations. I did wonder whether we wouldn't earlier, but we haven't. So agenda item 12 is questions from councillors. And I'm going to ask Councillor Maria Rowe to ask question 1, please.
Councillor Maria Rowe, Ward Member for Coal Hill and Wimborne Minster East. In May 2019, Dorset Council declared not only a climate change emergency, but also an ecological emergency. Dorset Council has many opportunities to show leadership on strengthening and protecting the natural environment. Since November 2019, I have been trying to find out what Dorset Council's policy is on the use of glyphosate. I've had many discussions and emails with officers, and I've had many different and conflicting responses. Some officers tell me that glyphosate is only used under statute to maintain hard surfaces and highways and used in exceptional circumstances to control pervasive weeds such as Japanese knotweed. In November 2021, at the Places and Resources Scrutiny Committee, the Climate Change and Ecological Emergency Strategy Progress Report stated definitively that glyphosate will now only be used as a management tool for highway verges. However, this is quite clearly not the case, as glyphosate is used on sangs quite liberally. Where I live, it has been sprayed down by the river, around drain covers, a 2-foot strip around a children's play area, around information boards, around the base of trees. And I have been told that using Roundup Provantage, which is readily available in supermarkets, will not have an adverse impact on bees and other insects, animals, or people. The last email I received stated that the Roundup herbicide has been one of the most trusted herbicides in the world for more than 35 years. The reality is that it is highly toxic and the science is being undermined. In 2020 and 2021, a landmark court cases have been taking place in the United States against Monsanto and the new owner, Bayer. Settlements of $100,000, 100,000 Roundup lawsuits, 100,000 Roundup lawsuits of $10.9 billion and $2 billion for personal injury have been made for people suffering from cancer. Professor Dave Goulson from the School of Life Sciences at the University of Sussex has for many years warned of the dangers of using glyphosate. The University of Birmingham published research in December 2020 where they tested keystone species and found that even at approved regulatory levels, glyphosate causes significant DNA damage, embryonic development failure, and interferes with the metabolism and gut function of animals. My question is, what is Dorset Council's policy on the use of glyphosate?
Thank you very much, Councillor Rowe, for that very interesting question. And we are going to hear a response from Councillor Ray Bryan.
Thank you, Councillor Rowe, for the question. I have a very detailed response, which I'm going to forward to you, but I can tell you what the policy is, so we'll just stick with the question, which is, what is the policy? Dorset Council take the health of our residents seriously. Dorset Council complies with all current national regulations and guidelines in the use of glyphosate. Dorset Council activity aims to reduce herbicide use and use mechanical control methods wherever practicable. As I say, I will forward to a very detailed response because it makes interesting reading. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Brown. Yes.
Thank you. I have a supplementary question, Chair. OK, thank you. Many councils have stopped using Roundup because of the ecological emergency, and governments are notoriously behind the curve recognising hazards. You only have to look back to the 1960s and 70s and how powerful the tobacco industry used to be. Think about how asbestos was thought to be safe, and more recently, the deadly cladding on Grenfell Tower. But we have a growing body of case law from the United States. And most importantly, we have scientific evidence. Many questions. My question requires just a yes or no answer. Is Dorset Council willing to risk a lawsuit for using glyphosate?
Councillor Bryan.
I'll get there in a minute. Well, there's an interesting question, and I'm going to get an answer for you, but I will send it on to you at the earliest convenience. I do know the answer, but I think I need to take care with the legal opinion because of the importance of the question.
Thank you very much, Councillor Bryan. Personally, I quite understand, and I hope you're happy with that response, Councillor Rowe. OK, thank you. Question 2 is from Councillor Kelvin Clayton.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Kelvin Clayton, Bridport Ward. Sorry, Ray, another one for you. The Council's Climate and Ecological Emergency Strategy states that it has a key role in lobbying government for clear policy and financial support required for the transition to a zero-carbon future. The notice of motion proposed by the Leader of the Council and approved at last Council calls for the Council to urge the Government to introduce an energy policy with the principal objective of securing energy self-sufficiency from as early date as possible using whatever forms of energy generation source within the UK are necessary to this end. Unless the latter is restricted to zero carbon energy, how does it intend to do both?
Thank you, Councillor Clayton. I'm afraid back to you, Councillor Bryan.
Thank you, Councillor Clayton, for the question. The motion presented by the Leader and approved at the last Council is not in conflict with our climate strategy. We are recognising that there is a need for a period of transition from a reliance on fossil fuels to an energy network that is fully resourced by renewable energy. It is clear that industrial and manufacturing machinery, transport and many other aspects of our daily lives will require oil-based products for a period of time, and until a transition can be made to alternatives. With current uncertainties and reliance on oil and gas from other countries, it makes sense for our country to become more self-sufficient in this regard. Following the debate at the last full council meeting, the council leader wrote to the Right Honourable Greg Hands, MP, Minister of State for Energy, Clean Growth and Climate Change, expressing the need for energy self-sufficiently utilising whatever forms of energy generation sourced from within the UK as are necessary to this end, including wind, solar, hydrogen. This letter emphasised the need for government to meet its declared 2050 net zero carbon target. Following COP26 in Glasgow last year, he sent a letter to central government expressing, amongst other things, the need for processes to be simplified to encourage the development of more renewable energy installations in the UK. I have pointed out that it is unnecessarily difficult to set up solar arrays, wind farms and tidal power generation in terms of bureaucracy, funding and physical infrastructure, and that we wanted the government to remove these barriers and empower councils to make their own decisions on how best to address these energy needs. We are, that's the leader and I, and several other members of the Cabinet, are actively lobbying government to encourage renewable energy development, but recognising that the period of transmission will be necessary to meet our current energy needs. That is why we have set a realistic date for Dorset Council to become carbon neutral. Our intention has always been and remains to become carbon neutral by 2040 or before, and for us to influence and support the wider county meetings, these goals, by 2050. The motion presented and approved at full council does not change this. If I can just add that I've always stated that 2040 was our long stop date, and it's well known at this council that I will do everything in my power to bring that further forward. But I need your help.
Thank you very much. Councillor Bryan. Do you have any supplemental question, Councillor? No? Fine, thank you. Our question 3 is from Councillor Belinda Borden.
Belinda Borden, Lyme Regis and Charmouth Ward. Article 52B of the Council's Constitution states that it is the responsibility of the Chairman of Council to preside over meetings of the Council so that its business can be carried out efficiently with regards to the rights of members and the interest of the community. Do these rights of members include the right to speak in opposition to a notice of motion?
Thank you, Councillor Borden. I will give you a response to this. I believe that this question is alluding to my decision to move to a vote after protesters disrupted our meeting on the 14th of April. I take my responsibilities as Chairman of the Council very seriously. As required by the Constitution, I work hard to ensure that our business is carried out efficiently and with regard to the rights of members and the interests of the community we serve. There was a motion on our agenda to be decided on the 14th of April, but protesters made a deliberate attempt to disrupt the meeting and to prevent a vote from going ahead. I moved straight to a vote rather than, you've heard all this earlier, I moved straight to a vote rather than adjourning to another occasion because I did not wish the protesters to succeed in preventing a democratic vote from taking place that evening, and because I was very concerned about the safety of the council. Sometimes I have to make decisions so that the council business can be carried on efficiently, and that may include curtailing debate that would otherwise take place. Members might not always agree with my decisions, but I do hope and expect that they will respect the chair and to abide by what I've decided. Did you have a supplementary question? Thank you. So, question 4 is from Councillor Alex Brenton.
Thank you, Chair. Whoops. Since declaring the climate and ecological emergency in 2019, Dorset's made substantial changes to the way the council operates, working towards being carbon neutral. However, there is one area where Dorset is not preparing for a low-carbon future, and that is in planning, policy and procedure. We are still permitting new buildings which are not fit for the next 30 years. They are neither carbon neutral in building techniques or in subsequent use by residents. As a planning committee, we are constantly told that we cannot demand carbon reduction measures as we have no policy. And we cannot have a policy until the local plan's agreed and accepted. And even then it's subject to government building regulations, which may or may not encourage these measures. In our planning officers' reports, we often have a nod to climate change, usually indicating whether there's a bus service or a train station nearby, as though lower car use is the only solution. If we can ask for biodiversity and environmental surveys, why cannot we ask for a Dorset protocol now, which demands information before the application is accepted? on things like building techniques which reduce wastage and excess concrete use, solar energy capture on roof tiles, passive heat systems, rainwater collection and storage and reuse, permeable outside coverings, drives and patios. Most councillors, I believe, on Dorset planning committees believe we urgently need a policy on the carbon footprint of all new buildings. When can we expect this to be delivered?
Thank you, Councillor Brenton. I'm going to ask Councillor David Walsh to respond to that question. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. And thank you very much, Councillor Brenton. Very important question and one that lots of people share with you, the frustration. As Councillor Bryan said, we are both lobbying government as much as we can on all of these aspects. Changes to building regulations are coming into place this year, which will introduce more stringent energy efficiency requirements for new dwellings. And further enhancements are due in 2025, when the National Future Homes Standard will be introduced. We cannot change development plan policy without adopting a new local plan or separate development plan document, which has gone through the statutory preparation process, including a public examination. The local plan programme is currently under review, and a revised programme has not yet been published. In the meantime, however, officers are carrying out some work on what can be done under the current policy framework, with the aim of developing an interim position statement based on existing national and local policies, but seeking to take as a proactive approach as we can. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Walsh. Councillor Brenton has a second question.
Yes, thank you. Every new building involves more impermeable covered space, increasing rainfall runoff, and every dwelling produces sewage. Natural England is concerned that mitigation measures to stop eutrophication of areas like Poole Harbour are not enough. In the meantime, planning permission will only be granted if Dorset can be satisfied it will not lead to an adverse effect on the integrity of a protected habitat as a consequence of the impact of nutrient enrichment on water quality. As all the properties in my ward drain eventually into the Poole Harbour Basin, can I assume that as our pumping and treatment plant in Litchett-Matravers already overflows regularly and cannot cope with the existing flows, that no new buildings will be permitted in Litchett-Matravers for the foreseeable future?
Thank you, Councillor Brenton. Over to you, Councillor Walsh.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you again, Councillor Brenton. People may have laughed, but I think it's a very serious question. We have adopted policies for mitigation of the effects of nitrogen on Poole Harbour, which allow development where it makes provision for appropriate mitigation of adverse effects on protected habitats. Natural England has recently published revised guidance on nutrients matters, suggesting that the impact of phosphorus on Poole Harbour needs to be considered, in addition to that of nitrogen. And further work is taking place to work out the implications of this. Important statement. Development proposals will be refused if they do not provide satisfactory mitigation, but can be allowed if they do. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Walsh. Do we have a supplementary question there? Thank you. Thank you for your consideration. We now come on to agenda item 13, appointments to committees and election of chairman and vice chairman of those committees. So I'm now going to ask the Corporate Director, Legal and Democratic, to introduce the report.
Good evening, members. This is a very short introduction to this report. It's the usual report that we bring to your annual meeting. It contains 3 recommendations. The first relates to the allocation of committee seats, appointments to committees, joint panels and boards as nominated by your political group leaders. The second recommendation relates to a delegated authority to be given to the group leaders to make in-year changes to committee panel and board appointments. And the third relates to the nominations for committee chairman and vice chairman for 22-23. Those are set out in Appendix 4 to the report. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jonathan. So I will now ask Councillor Spencer Flower to propose all of the recommendations. Thank you. Sorry, before you do, Susan. Sorry, Claire. Sorry, can't see very well today.
It's not, yeah, there we go. I don't want to be churlish, but as usual, I asked the leader of both the largest groups if various of us, you know, can take some places on various committees where we feel we have a lot to contribute. And as usual, we didn't get them. And I understand there's a lot of pressure on you from your own members to allocate this. I absolutely get that. But just to say, we do want to do more. We do want to help more. We do want to contribute more. So, you know, we're here when and if you give us the call. Thanks.
Thank you for that offer. Thank you. I apologise for calling you Susan. Losing it again. Councillor Flower.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I'm pleased to move the recommendations as set out in the report. I have nothing to add. Thank you.
Thank you. I believe the proposal, the recommendations will be seconded by Councillor Frye.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Yes, I'm pleased to second the motion and all the positions. So I think that's all I need to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any more comments, please? In which case, I believe we're going to vote for this en bloc. And please get your handsets ready.
Okay, the vote is now open. Councillor Brenton, could you use your clicker pad, please? Councillor Kirby, could you try your... Thank you. Thank you. The vote's now closed. The results are 69 in favour, 2 against and 2 abstentions. The motions are carried.
Thank you very much, Susan. I promise I won't call you Claire. Okay. Agenda item 14, we have a notice of motion. Councillor Les Frye to read out and propose the notice of motion. Thank you. Councillor Les Frye.
Chairman, I believe there may be someone trying to get your attention for another reason at that side of the room.
Councillor Robin Legg.
And that's because there is an amendment which I'm moving and I have got a seconder.
Excuse me, Councillor Legg, we need to hear the motion first. Thank you.
Apologies, Chairman. I thought it might pertain to the last item or be something of importance. No, I didn't mean that. I'm sorry. I can't help but be flippant. I know. I make friends everywhere I go. So, talking of being polite and nice, we must always support our democracy by ensuring the rights to peaceful protest are respected, as they actually were this evening. However, the behaviour of 2 climate protesters at full council on the 14th of April 2022 ruined the potential for an active debate by elected members. It prevented any further amendments to the motion being put forward and encroached on the safety of members and officers of the council. The security of those in public office has been very largely self-policed through common decency and respect for the rule of law. Recent events across the county and in this council chamber have caused concern and anxiety for the safety of those in public life who abide by the principles of democracy and are elected to represent the interests of the people of Dorset. Security measures, such as we've seen this evening, will now need to be stepped up to protect elected members and officers of the council from a repeat of any unauthorised public access to the council chamber, which will sadly be at a cost to the local taxpayer, who we do not want to be spending their money on unnecessary things. So the motion I'm actually putting forward is that members of Dorset Council condemn the behaviour of those who disrupted the full council meeting on Thursday the 14th of April. Quite simply, we do not condone it and it was not appropriate. And that is it.
Thank you, Councillor Lacey Clark. I understand that Councillor Les Frye would like to second the motion.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Yes, I would, but I would like to reserve my right to speak for later. Thank you.
Fine, thank you. So, Councillor Heatley.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Brian Heatley from Rodwell and Wyke in Weymouth. I've set myself an unpopular task for this evening. I want to try and explain why people do the sort of thing that happened at the last council meeting.
Madam Chairman, the amendment has been moved.
Yes. Excuse me, Councillor Heatley, could you just hold that thought while I go back to Councillor Legg? Thank you.
Robin Legg, Sherborne Rural. You know how I like to be popular, Madam Chairman, so I'm rather hoping that what I've got to say will prove uncontroversial. Condemnation is easy, and obviously one of the factors in the debate, or one of the motion, is to condemn what happened. My amendment changes that condemnation to one of regret, because I think it was a big mistake, and also to be critical of the leadership of the council, A, to allow somebody to enter, or people to enter the chamber, and C, to effectively use that as an opportunity to curtail debate. Now, condemnation is easy, but sometimes it's sensible to try and see the world from another perspective. I can sense already that some members might be getting worked up by the very thought of that. You may see this in simple terms. A couple of ladies, if I may say so, of mature years, entering the chamber to disrupt the debate is an affront to democracy. But it might be as well to reflect on what motivates people to engage in such direct action. It could just be that there is a widespread public view that whoever you vote for, it makes no difference whatsoever. People feel impotent. In a world dominated by multinational corporations with budgets bigger than many nations and billionaires who think they hold the secret to what's good for free speech and democracy, it's hard not to be sympathetic to that view. In a choice between apathy and agitation, some choose the latter. We might like to think of ourselves as important and influential people, but don't fool yourself, because the public aren't, which is why they stay away from elections in increasingly large numbers. We have a duty to invigorate democracy and to show that we can be the catalyst for change. Perhaps Extinction Rebellion activists would not be provoked to such action if Conservative members here demonstrated that they were not half-hearted about the issue of climate change. When we passed a resolution declaring a climate emergency 3 years ago, 8 Conservative members either abstained or voted against. And the motion you forced through without debate last month suggests that 8 may be an underestimate. Apart from the ease with which these 2 protesters entered the chamber, council meetings are not a stranger to protest. At our very first meeting at Southwark's House, Special Education Needs protesters with placards formed up in a line between the chair and seated members to interrupt proceedings. But we didn't turn into headless chickens on that occasion. I remember the fox hunting debate in this very chamber nearly 30 years ago when...
Excuse me, Councillor Legg. Excuse me, Councillor Legg. You did say you would like to propose an amendment, and I don't believe you actually outlined the amendment you wanted to propose.
Thought, Madam Chairman, I summarised, without reading it out in detail, what...
Quite an awful lot, and none of which I could find an amendment in. I understand you've got 1 3/4 minutes left, Councillor. Excuse me, members, the amendment will flash up on the screen any minute now, I've been told. I can't read it. I would ask, please, do we have a seconder for this amendment? Councillor Ireland.
It is an amendment.
It's contrary, it's literally the opposite.
It isn't.
Ours is to condemn.
Yes.
They have removed the condemnation.
Yeah, we've changed the word to regret. We've changed the word to regret.
It's the counter.
Excuse me, Councillor Legg, please don't shout. It doesn't actually emphasise your case anymore. It just makes you look like Mr. Angry. Sorry.
Working. I was equally as loud, and I apologise for that as well. It's the opposite. It's not an amendment, it's the counter, isn't it?
We will now pause the meeting for just a few minutes while we discuss the matter. Thank you. Please stay in your seats. A comfort break very quickly. Thank you, Mr. O'Leary. Thank you, members. Please take your seats. White smoke has appeared from the chimney. It has been judged that it is a legitimate amendment. That's Councillor Legg's amendment. And so I will ask again, please, Councillor Ireland to second the proposed amendment.
Yeah, I'm happy to second the amendment, and I reserve a right to speak at the end, please.
Thank you, Councillor Ireland. So we will now go into a debate. Councillor Clayton.
Thank you, Chair. Whilst in all honesty, I struggle to even regret the behaviour of those who disrupted the meeting, I do feel strong that the resulting disruption of the democratic process was made much worse by the decisions made by the leadership of this council. I utterly fail to understand how a motion can be voted on without those who oppose it being given the opportunity to speak. This was a flagrant erosion of democracy, and for this reason, I support the amendment.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Clayton. Councillor Jesperson.
Thank you. I'm indirectly speaking to this amendment, Madam Chairman. I wish to object strongly to the sexist and misogynistic language used by Councillor Legg in his preamble to his motion. In referring to ladies of mature years, the clear implication being that women who are not young are to be seen as ineffectual, harmless and not important. I would like Councillor Legg to withdraw these words. Such attitudes have no place in this chamber, as the many women of mature years around the state.
Councillor Ferrari.
Right, got it. I ponder what level of law breaking is acceptable because a member of the community thinks that that's the right thing to do to advocate their case. Where is that line drawn? This body draws up regulations that seeks the governance of the people, much like Parliament that sets laws, and it is the duty of people within those bodies not to support lawbreakers, not to flagrantly support their activity and propose that's the right course of action. It is difficult to condemn more strongly breaking laws. Thank you.
Quiet, please. Quiet, please. Councillor O'Leary.
Thank you, Chairman. This amendment is nothing short of appeasement. The language used in this motion doesn't accept the acceptance of law and order. What I struggle to understand is, and Councillor Jesperson mentioned it, just because somebody is an elderly woman does not mean she can be dangerous. Anybody could have walked in that chamber, they could have had acid, they could have had a knife. I don't know why you think it's funny. Have you had any death threats this week? Because I have. And my family take them, seriously. I don't. But there we go. Some of us have thicker skin. Like, as I said, our freedoms have been fought for centuries. And the language that's been used in this amendment is nothing short of appeasement. You cannot compromise with lawbreakers. We are not lawmakers, but we're the next step down as elected members. These people that came in here last week, one of them has stood for election multiple times. Each time, she's been rejected. That just shows you that they cannot accept the will of the people. And until they accept that, I'm afraid they can be banned for a lifetime, for all I care. I strongly oppose this motion. It's nothing short of appeasement to a rabble and to an unelected small minority of people that seem to dominate certain sections of the opposition. They seem to pander to them every time. They say we don't take climate change seriously. I don't think I've actually heard anything else this evening other than a discussion on climate change. Yet I will be at a surgery tomorrow in my ward. I had 2 last week. Not one resident's ever brought it up. They just pander to small minorities for political gain. They try and compete the Liberals against...
Thank you, Councillor O'Leary. Is there anybody else that wants to speak to the amendment, please? Councillor Parry?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I take a rare intervention on these sorts of matters. As you know, I don't tend to, but I will on this particular one. Because it was masked in the respectability of the wisdom of being a grandparent, was their headline they achieved for it. Well, my grandparents took a very different stance when raising me. They didn't have to teach me to pick up litter. They taught me not to drop it in the first place. And if you're serious about the countryside of Dorset and the environment we live in, then let's make it a litter-free place. Because if it is, that will save this council hundreds, if not millions of pounds, which can be spent on accelerating other environmental projects that we would wish to deliver. They also went on to create an act of criminal damage. And I say the message from this council should not be one of soft on crime and soft on the causes of crime. We heard very clearly from Councillor O'Leary minutes ago that at least one of those protesters had been democratically rejected by the electorate. We are all democratically elected. We have been given the voice to represent our residents. And it is a broad church, and opinions will be heard. And there are ways that you can still protest peacefully in this chamber. Tonight, we have seen that in some of the questions that have been raised and the challenges posed by members of the public to this council and its leadership. And that is the respectful way to protest peacefully. By all means, if you do want a different agenda to the one that is offered by any of the councillors present tonight, you have the right to stand for election to this council. And I, for one, would always encourage somebody to do that. Although I do, of course, hope that wisdom will prevail and they would return a Conservative administration.
Thank you, Councillor Parry. Next, Councillor Kimber.
Thank you, Chair. And I actually welcome this amendment because it gives us an opportunity to actually analyse and look at what happened at the last council meeting. We're looking at these 2 ladies, women, thank you. I believe for a moment they did a brave act. Now, it does take a lot to do this. Now, I've been thinking quite heavily over the last week. I had a grandmother that was a suffragette. I had an auntie that spent almost days and years at Greenham Common protesting against cruise missiles being stationed there. So at times there is a case for people to make their voices heard. Now, I think we're saying one of the protesters lost the election. Yes, she lost it by I understand, by about 40 votes. No more, no less. And it doesn't mean that she'd never, ever stand again. And I think from my point of view, that sometimes we have to listen to our employers, and I've said it to you many times. Our employers are demanding changes, especially around what they were saying, talking about, was the drilling of oil. So we have got to realise that climate change for our electorate is probably top of the agenda. So from that point, I will be supporting the amendment. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Kimber. We have Councillor Took.
Thank you, Chair. I support this amendment. The difference between regret and condemnation is one of degree. I accept that. But what those protesters did was illegal, and they will face the law in due course. And that's as it should be. Very much regret their actions. The reason I regret their actions is because they stopped me from speaking against that motion. And as I left the chamber in a state of high dudgeon, because debate was curtailed when I do not believe it should have been, I came through the chamber and I explained to the ladies exactly what they'd done and why it was regrettable. However, they were not the only ones who stopped democratic debate. That was stopped by the chair. That was actually stopped by the chair. No more debate, we'll vote now. Well, that's not a way to continue with a democratic process. If you don't feel safe continuing as you are, then defer it until we've got security in place. But don't just stop it, because that is undemocratic and extremely difficult to support. So I support this amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Took. Councillor Brooks.
Thank you. I can't support the amendment. I support the condemnation of those women that turned... It's on. Do you want me to hold it up? Okay, can you hear? Right. I can't support the amendment, and I feel I have to support the condemnation of the people that came in and interrupted our meeting. It was breaking the law, but more than that, from my point of view, I am a grandmother of 6 grandchildren, and I am of a similar age and demographic to those ladies. Who gave them the right to come in here into a chamber of democratically elected people and tell us that we are wrong and that they are right and that they can disrupt what we do? I feel really strongly that they do not represent my views and they don't represent my grandchildren either. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brooks. Do we have anybody else wishing to speak to the amendment? Councillor Weller.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairman. I don't particularly want to speak to the amendment. I think the whole incident at the last meeting was regrettable. That doesn't mean I regret. I think the incident was regrettable. I also think the criticism of how you handled that incident is regrettable. It's very hard for any of us to know what was right and what was wrong on that occasion. The incident should not have happened. You did your very best to continue with the meeting and to show people who behave in that fashion that they can't just disrupt and cause anarchy. And that's what it was. It was anarchy. They may have been grannies behaving like anarchists. I don't think my grandchildren or my great-grandchildren would have been terribly impressed if I'd behaved in that way. Perhaps their grandchildren were. But mainly, I want to give my support to the way that you handled the incident. I don't think that you have anything to regret by your behaviour at the last meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Weller. Councillor Christopher, and after which I will ask Councillor Island to sum up.
Members, I do take life very seriously. I have to tell you that today I've worked on projects including affordable housing, and I've also dealt with a family where the father committed suicide. Life is very difficult, but I don't think it gives people cause to actually disrupt democratic meetings. When we were at Southwark's house, we were informed that we would migrate to County Hall and we would be safe. We would be safe from disruption, and that clearly wasn't the case. What we saw back in April was real disruption. It was a disturbance. It was a disturbance to everyone. It caused disruption for officers. It caused disruption for members. There were people here that evening who desperately needed to get home. There wasn't a possibility of continuing normally, and all action continued with the agreement of our monitoring officer. And I do not like the use of the word regret. For many here who are associated with service families or who indeed served in the military, the word regret is always associated with the IRA. When they used to kill people, they used to use the word regret. A lot of members on that occasion in April were seriously disturbed and traumatised as they drove home. I was not one of them, but rest assured there were members who were seriously traumatised. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Over to you, Councillor, Ireland. I've got lost on my own list here.
Thank you, Chairman. So I thank my colleague, Councillor Legg, for proposing this amendment to the original motion. And also I'd like to thank Mr Mert for coming to the correct decision and allowing it. The primary reason the original cannot be supported is that it is actually factually incorrect. Whatever your opinion of the actions of the two grannies for the future at the last meeting of the Council, they were acting in protest against the oxymoron of a Conservative motion supporting the continued exploitation and burning of fossil fuels, when this Council has declared a climate emergency. And they most certainly did not prevent members from amending or debating that motion. A note from Councillor Bryan's earlier response to Councillor Clayton's question that he stated debate took place. I don't recall any, and maybe he was in a different meeting. And I also note Councillor Ferrari's comments and others that laws were broken. I hadn't realised before that he was a judge or a person of law. And as far as I'm aware, the protesters have not been charged with any offence. Perhaps they might not be, but it's not our position to make those judgments. As stated by our monitoring officer to me in an email dated 26th of April, and I quote, "There were a range of options open to the chairman. She could have chosen to hear from those councillors who had previously indicated to speak, or she could have adjourned to another occasion, or she could have moved to the vote," and that's what she did. So it was most certainly not the protesters who prevented the debate happening. Their actions precipitated events where alternatives existed. In my opinion, the wrong one was taken, thereby denying members of this council opportunities the democratic process normally presents. So Councillor Legg's amended motion accurately sums up what actually happened on that night and has my full support. Thank you.
We will now move to the vote on the amendment. Sorry.
Thank you, Chairman. I would like to request clarification on the amendment. I'd like also to request a recorded vote on the amendment and also on what will become the substantive motion. Substantive motion.
We'll put the amendment back on the screen for you so that it'll be quite clear what we're voting on. People, if you are willing, thank you. I think that's enough to support the
The vote is now open. Yeah. Thank you, everyone. The results of the vote in favour of the amendment: 24 in favour, 46 against, 3 abstentions. The amendment is lost.
Thank you very much, everybody. So we will now return to the substantive motion. It has, in fact, been proposed by Councillor Lacey Clark, seconded by Councillor Les Frye. Would anybody...
Councillor Brian Heatley.
Right. Councillor Heatley. Councillor okay.
Thank you, Chair. As I said when I stood up before, I want to try and explain why people might act in the way they did. I'm a retired civil servant. I'm pretty cautious about these things, and like Councillor Ferrari, I'm very attracted in normal circumstances to the rule of law. You can't have democracy without it, otherwise decisions made by a body like this would simply be empty. They'd be like the decisions, I don't know, of the Russian Duma. So it's important. But sometimes there is an actual kind of democracy that is failing and fails to solve a problem. Before the First World War, women didn't have the vote. The only practical thing they could do about it was civil disobedience to get it with the suffragettes. In the years between the wars, the people in India could not prevail against the Westminster Parliament that was preventing their independence. The only practical thing they could do was follow Gandhi in his campaign of civil disobedience. More recently, black people in the United States, many of them did not have the vote and couldn't even sit legally in certain seats on the buses. When someone did sit in the wrong seat, most of us think that was an illegal but utterly defensible act. And so there is a long tradition of civil disobedience when democracy fails. Now, how does that affected by climate? What has climate change got to do with that? The point is that our democracy is failing now with climate change because of its limits in time and in space. Our democracy is essentially short-term. We heard that from the leader this evening when he referred to the next 2 years. We're all thinking about the next election. And that makes it hard to deal with a problem which is gradually evolving. That's not a new thought. Plenty of people have had that one. It's also confined in space. The problem, the causes of climate change lie in the richer industrialised nations. The countries that will really suffer from climate change, who will bear the burden of it, are not us. They're the people living nearer the equator. If we go on as we are, about 2 billion people living in that part of the earth are going to be in a place that's uninhabitable, and literally they will have to move or die. Now, our system can't cope with that because they've no representation in any democratic forum. We've no system of world government. So, because future people have no voice, because the people who are far away and are going to suffer have no voice, sometimes it is necessary to act in ways against our democracy and the rule of the North. I'm not going to condemn the people, the brave people who came here to our last meeting. They were pursuing a great cause, and we will look back on them like the suffragettes, like the people on that bus in the United States, and like Gandhi. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Heatley. Councillor Baldwin.
Thank you for letting me speak this time, Chairman, and congratulations on your re-election. I was extremely disappointed that I was prevented from speaking at the last meeting, my first Dorset Council meeting, since I had not only wanted to oppose the contradictory motion which undermined the Council's own climate and ecological strategy, the government's net zero targets and COP26 pledges, as well as the stark warnings from the IPCC the previous week, but also to pay tribute to my predecessor, Beryl Turner. Beryl had represented the people of Lyme Regis and Charmouth with diligence, loyalty and pride for many years as a town, district and county councillor before joining the new Dorset Council in 2019. More recently, however, he had expressed misgivings about the lack of urgency shown by Dorset Council on the climate and ecological crisis and the wasted opportunities caused by the majority party's seeming inability to listen to all elected members' voices. Beryl would therefore have been as horrified as I was had he witnessed the refusal of the chairman to allow a debate on the contentious motion, item 13 on the 14th of April, proposing increased energy self-reliance by all means available to us, particularly in the week after nearly 44% of those who voted for his successor had clearly shown their desire for more action on the climate crisis. Young people in particular are driving the need for change, but every generation is really concerned about the future and demand a far better response from those elected to represent them than to go backwards by advocating increased use of fossil fuels. It was Councillor O'Leary's statement to second the motion urging the increased use of coal, oil, gas and nuclear energy which sparked the peaceful protest by two grandmothers fearing for their family's future.
That's factually incorrect.
Thank you. Who can blame them? When elected representatives fail to listen to public opinion, to young people, to scientific and expert opinion, to the government and all its expert advisors, to the IPCC and to the voters in Lyme Regis and Charmouth less than a week earlier, the democratic process is failing. The democratic process in Dorset Council then failed us all further when the chairman refused any discussion on the contradictory and contentious motion once the meeting had been reconvened. I therefore oppose the motion to condemn the behaviour of those who disrupted the meeting and instead condemn the majority party's refusal to listen to reasoned debate from other elected members and ultimately to the residents of Dorset, in particular those supporting more action on the climate crisis from Lyme Regis and Charmouth.
Thank you, Councillor Baldwin. Councillor O'Leary.
Thank you, Chairman. I just want to say I have tremendous respect for Councillor Heatley. He's ever thoughtful and he's always a gentleman. But I must say I disagree with his comparison. The suffragettes were fighting for the right to vote. Gandhi and his seeking of independence did not have the right to vote, nor did millions of Indians. Martin Luther King and those people in Alabama and Mississippi and all in the South were fighting for the right to vote, which was achieved in 1965. Civil disobedience caused that. But once that was achieved, voting then took that place of that civil disobedience. We live in a country of representative elective democracy. The last full election in this county was the general election. The people of Dorset returned a full slate of Conservative MPs, all of whom gained above 50% of the vote. That was the last vote with a high turnout in this county. Therefore, that is a democratic will. I listen to my residents. Councillor Borden listens to hers. Our residents are going to have different priorities. I represent a far different ward than a lot of people in here. We all have different priorities. Let's not assume that all of our residents are all going to be concerned about climate change. I'm not going to say that all of Councillor Borden's residents don't care about climate change. I don't know her residents. I don't vote them. Let's stop assuming on that fact. In the course of human affairs, democratic freedoms have been fought for. People have died for them, people have sacrificed for them. But that is only acceptable when there isn't a democratic alternative en route to protect them. At the minute, we have two people, I'm not going to use anything else, so I don't want to get in trouble about what you described them as, who disrupted a meeting of elected councillors. One of them failed to get elected. That shows you that the people of her area didn't want her to represent them. They returned another member of her party, Councillor Kimber. That's their opinion again. But they also returned Councillor Hughes. Let's stop thinking that our residents are completely dominated by climate change. That's all they think about. It's not what my residents bring to me. It might be what other residents bring to them. But I absolutely condemn the act of last month, and I'm afraid that some people in here have opened a whirlwind, and we're reaping what they're sowing. And I'm deeply concerned about how extreme the actions are going to get. You tell us to listen to people, young people, activists. The number of activists that showed here, a number no more than 100. There are hundreds of thousands of people in this county. Let's represent them, not just special minority interest groups that shout the loudest. So I'll be voting for this motion to utterly condemn the acts of last month.
Thank you, Councillor O'Leary. Councillor Christopher.
I find it very disturbing that people on the other side of the chamber honestly believe that the Conservative Party doesn't take climate change seriously. Last month, on the 1st of April, the government introduced the plastic packaging tax. This actually came forward in the Finance Act 2021. And members on this side of the House need to know that Councillor Carol Jones and myself have been looking at this at length. And it is a piece of legislation that's come in. It's a quarterly tax, which should make a huge difference in respect of single-use plastic. Our children in this county go to the House of Commons and talk to members of Parliament about their concerns on single-use plastic. Clearly, the government does take these issues seriously. I can see there's some unnerving sniggering at the back, but I'm now going to move on to talk about farming matters. This government, with the benefit of Brexit, is bringing in the environmental land management system. It is also bringing in the sustainable farming incentive and moving away from area-based payments. And those are just two examples that I've given in respect of the plastic packaging tax and also the change in respect of farming, whereby the government is clearly listening to environmental concerns. So I do find it very disturbing when people say that the Conservatives don't take climate change seriously. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Christopher. Councillor Sutton.
Thank you, Chair. It will come as no surprise to anyone here that I entirely endorse what my colleague, Councillor Heatley, has said. I'd also like to take issue with a couple of the comments made by the last two speakers. To Councillor O'Leary, yes, there are people, there are people taking on our democratic institutions not in order to gain the right to vote, but actually in order to gain the right to a future. And this is going to affect, as you well know, Louis, the poor residents in our communities as well as poorer countries in the world, far more than some of us. So it's not special minority groups, it's all of us. It really is all of us. To Councillor Christopher, I would say, I'm certainly not one of those people that would suggest that the Tory government is doing nothing. Absolutely not. Of course, there are lots of fantastic initiatives which we support, but I don't think that's really the point here. But the point I really do want to make is I think we'd all agree that last meeting marked a really low point for Dorset Council. I was personally upset that not a single Conservative member voted for my motion, and that some seemed angry with me for not withdrawing my motion in favour of a counter-motion, which effectively gave the green light to new fossil fuel exploration. Many of you were upset or angry that two women protested against the rejection of my motion in the way they did. That's, I think, what happened. And many of us were upset or angry about what followed when the meeting was reconvened. But this is what I'm struggling with. Rather than calming down and refocusing, as Carol said earlier, but in a different context, refocusing on the interests of residents who are struggling to find the right school placement for their child or the right care care for their elderly parent, here we are debating whether to condemn the behaviour of those two women. And in the process, we are reigniting all that bad feeling. So I don't know, I really don't understand why this motion came before us. While we're at it, shall we condemn the behaviour of people who have caused heathland fires with their barbecues? Or indeed, shall we condemn those who are deliberately poisoning trees across Dorset? I don't think that's what we're here for. I don't think that's what we're here for, to stand here condemning people. I really, really don't. And I think we're doing everybody, we're doing our electorate a massive disservice by even having this debate tonight.
Thank you, Councillor Sutton. Councillor Bryan.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Members, I represent a ward of approximately 7,000 voters. I have not received any emails, any phone calls, any letters on anything to do with climate change. And yet I have worked my socks off to support the motion that we carried out. I have always said I will play my part in achieving as much carbon reduction as we possibly can. We did a recent survey, of which you've all received copies of, and unfortunately climate change came well down the list. Now I go to my main problem, and I raised this with one of the protesters, and she just scoffed. One of the problems I have is getting the general public to understand that we've got a problem. The general public are disinterested in climate change, especially with the current cost of living crisis and various other things. What happened in this chamber, or since what happened in this chamber, I've received a number of emails asking why we allowed this to happen. And I find it very, very unfortunate that this action was taken, because it has kindled a lot of people's thoughts. Why are we bothering with climate change? And this is a big problem for me going forward. And none of you can question my passion on this. I have a real problem now in trying to get the public support. But what I will guarantee you is, irregardless of the irresponsible behaviour by two women, I will still endeavour to push forward the climate agenda, and I'm working against some of my own party. But I will make sure that we keep going forward. But what happened in the chamber that night was irresponsible, unnecessary, because we are doing so much on climate change in this county. You're all aware we had 19 million to spend. The good news is we've allocated 18 million of it, and we will allocate the full 19 million. And that has brought about tremendous pressure. Nobody can say this council is not performing on climate change. And that's why I feel really, really disappointed. In fact, on the night I was fuming because it was so unnecessary. I've listened to all parties. I've listened to Extinction Rebellion, much to the anger of some of my fellow colleagues. I've listened to Dorset Can. I've listened to all the lobbying groups. John Selgrim and I have spent hours talking to these groups. So we have been a listening council all the way through. The damage this has done in the general public perception is the very reason I am going to support the motion, because we have to get the message across that that is not acceptable behaviour, and breaking the law is not acceptable. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Councillor Taylor. Jill Taylor.
We live in a representative democracy. We're here to represent our residents, and that's what quite a few people have already said. we're not actually here to listen to every single one of them and take every single one of their opinions into account. I personally have never had any emails about climate change. Equally, I haven't had any emails about the cost of living crisis that is on, the Ukrainian war. I haven't had any emails about Partygate, Beergate, anything else like that. I've actually had very few emails about COVID. I've had a heck of a lot of emails about things like potholes, dog poo, all the things that we get as emails. I've had a huge amount about housing. Everybody seems to find me about housing, which I deal with. And to be quite honest, I wonder if that is the biggest crisis on this council. But we are in a representative democracy. Therefore, it's our duty to listen to what is being told to us by governments, by scientists, by experts, and to act on that. That is what we're here for. We're here to think for the people and to represent them as best we can, not to follow what exactly they want. I think with this, we need to get a bit of a sense of proportion. As has been said, they could have come in with acid, but they didn't. They could have come in with a bomb, but they didn't. For heaven's sake, they came in and glued themselves to the table. Big deal. This is really getting out of proportion to saying that they've done something illegal when they haven't been charged with anything. I'm not a solicitor, I'm not a lawyer, I'm not a judge. But the bottom line is, I don't know if they've done anything illegal because it's not my job to know that. And it's for the judiciary to sort them out and deal with them appropriately, not ours. And I think just for the sake of accuracy, one of those is an elected member. So one of those was representing her residents on one of the parish councils. Sorry? Either way, she is still representing the residents within her ward, whether she's co-opted. And if somebody is co-opted, to be quite honest, that shows the state of our democracy. When you look at the turnout last week, and we've got a duty to do something about that and treat this, basically, I'm going to be voting against this because unless we get democracy right, we're going nowhere.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Councillor Orrell.
Thank you, Madam Chair. John Orrell, Councillor for Melcombe Regis. I'd like to pick up on where Councillor Heatley left off and look ahead and see this as it really is. This is the biggest crisis that faces us. I mean, it's been said that our residents are not emailing us or contacting about this, so we can ignore it. Well, that's the problem with climate change. It can be kind of ignored in the short term, but if you look at the long term, what we are facing is actually the whole organised human society. This is a threat to the entire human civilization over the next century. And it's not an urgent problem, like the potholes and the dog mess, but it is an important problem, and we have to have a long-term view to tackle it. Unfortunately, it's not at the top of people's agendas, but it should be. My residents in Melcombe Regis, unfortunately, the good people of Weymouth built a town on a sandbar. My residents, most of them live less than 6 feet above sea level, and they're going to be directly impacted by climate change over the next 50 years. Sadly, a lot of them don't realise that, but I realise that, and you should all realise that. This is going to really, really hit us as a country, as a planet. And so this should be on, even if it's not on the top of our residents' agenda, it should be on the top of ours, because this is the very future of mankind and the very future of our planet. So when we look back and say, what did you do during the war, Daddy? So what did you do during climate change? Did you vote for oil rigs and fracking? Or did you vote for wind turbines and marine turbines? And that's why this is so important. And I know this was irritating when we had this protest, but I can see why they protested, because those women saw into the future and they're coming back. And the drumming that was annoying us this evening, it annoyed me as well to start with. And then I thought about it, and that is the kind of like drumbeat, the heartbeat of the earth. That's people saying, come on, you've got to save this planet. And this is that important. So I will be voting accordingly. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Orrell. Councillor Took.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to support a lot of what Councillor Bryan said, because I know he's been working hard on the climate and ecological emergency. I was part of the EAP that discussed it, and it went into great depth. A great deal of the work that Councillor Bryan has done was undermined by the motion put forward by the leader, because that motion told us to use any available means to get whatever energy out of the ground, rip it out however we can, opening the doors to mining, drilling, fracking. And of course, there's a large area of Dorset from north of Dorchester across to Councillor Wharf's ward, which has got a licence, and then down south. So there's a big T in Dorset that is licensed for fracking. They haven't explored that yet. Maybe they will, maybe they won't. But it's very difficult when this council's climate and ecological emergency work is undermined so completely by that sort of motion, which calls on government to do anything. Just rip it out of the ground, get it into the fuel pumps, whatever. And that's really a failure of judgment, I think. You probably disagree, Leader, but to my mind, it's a failure of judgment that we are saying we'll get energy out of the ground, however it comes, whatever, and devil take the hindmost effectively. Yeah. So I can't support condemning people who take that seriously. I regret their actions very deeply. I regret it a great deal. But to condemn them is, I think, a step over. I understand the anger. I understand the anger because it was extremely irritating that they came and disrupted it. But this is a serious problem. This is a very serious problem. And I don't know where Councillor O'Leary's ward in Weymouth is, up the hill or down the hill, but a coastal area could get its feet wet fairly soon. So I'm not going to condemn them. I bitterly regret what they did, and I bitterly regret the results of that action in curtailing debate. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Took. I'm going to go to Sherry Jesperson, Councillor Sherry Jesperson next, and then on to Councillor Spencer Flower, who put forward the motion, and then Councillor Les Frye to sum up. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Councillor Sherry Jesperson. Councillor Taylor referred a few speeches ago to the state of our democracy. This is a point that hasn't been made here today. Violence, threats, attacks on people's homes. These are surely the reasons why good people are choosing not to stand for elected office anymore, but to go and find a different way in which to do good in the community. If we cannot bring ourselves to condemn actions such as those last week, we will go further down the road of undermining democracy, and that, Madam Chairman, is something that we will all live to regret.
Thank you, Councillor Jesperson. Councillor Flower.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I wasn't going to speak on this item, but I've heard so much It's far higher than it should be. Do you want me to start again, or have you heard me? Okay. So my comment about utilising every means includes, as was said earlier on, wind, solar, hydrogen. Hydrogen is going to be the answer to our problem, actually. That is the future. The other things are only sticky plasters in the short term when we get to hydrogen. So the context of what I said is being misunderstood or deliberately not understood. And that is the context of reducing our reliance on use of foreign energy. We can do a lot more here. As I've said it in here, we wean ourselves off of the use of burning fossil fuels. We'll always need oil in one form or another. I checked the other day to see what minerals were in my smartphone. 75%, of which nearly 25% of it is plastic. Where does that come from? It comes from oil. So it's not the burning. I support the view about reducing the need for burning oil and gas, because it creates the carbon footprint we're trying to deal with. But it's the use of it. It isn't the extraction of it. We need to get away from relying too heavily on what we import. It helps the country's economy as well, and it deals with self-sufficiency, and part of what I said in here, it links to the cost of living. And I can tell you now, the biggest item that I get in my postbag is the impact of the cost of living crisis that we've got at the moment. Some of that's been caused by the Ukrainian war, and some of it's been caused by other factors. That's what this is primarily. And two parts of this was in support of Claire Sutton's original motion, albeit in slightly different language, about asking government to give us some power to deal with rejecting a mineral extraction if there are material planning reasons to do so. And that has to be based on policy. It's in here. People voted against it. You know, it's disappointing. People have cherry-picked the bits out that happen to suit their argument. Read it properly, understand the context of it, and you'll find a lot of us in this chamber will find ourselves in a common position to agree on the principle of reducing the carbon footprint in the UK, which I believe, Ray will tell me, it's about 1% of the world's carbon footprint. So we'll do our bit, 1 and 2%. But let's go to China and the America and others were significantly higher. We'll do our bit, but we've got to do it in a rational, sensible way. Thank you, Jim.
Thank you, Councillor Flower. Councillor Frye, are you ready to do some summing up of this subject?
How do you follow all that? Thank you all. First, as a former police officer, I cannot condone the behaviour that went on before. Some people have said they're not a judge or jury here, but the definition of those who want to know, criminal damage occurs when someone unlawfully and intentionally or recklessly damages or destroys property belonging to another person. Examples of criminal damage include arson, forced entry onto property, and graffiti on a public building. The people wouldn't have been arrested, they would have been invited in for an interview, and I suspect being summoned. So I would never condone anybody who breaks the law. That is not the way forward. I totally support the work of those campaigning against climate change. We must all do what we can to persuade and encourage those in power and authority to make the changes to ensure that our planet survives for all those who come after us. But we must do this lawfully and properly. Otherwise, you risk causing the public purse to incur extra costs at a time when so many people are struggling to meet the bills. By not protesting lawfully, risk alienating those members of our society we really do need on our side. Dorset Council does not have the power to make the changes we would want. For example, Dorset Council is unable to make developers fit renewables on new developments, and my colleague, Councillor Brian Heatley, knows that I repeatedly raise this question at planning meetings. Following the recent motion, the lead has written to government. We do have differences about the wording of that letter, which I completely accept was at odds to some views. But a letter is just about all our strongest weapon and all that we can realistically do. We cannot make the government explore and develop better options to power our engines and heat our homes. I do not think electric is the complete answer, as both batteries and solar panels have disposal issues. We need more work around other options, including hydrogen as a starter, in order to power our heavy goods vehicles and farm machinery. So why target Dorset Council with protests, either in or out of the chamber? Is it for publicity because we're an easy target? Or can we make a massive change to what we are doing? Let me give you a few facts. In 2019, the County of Dorset emitted 1,662,000 tonnes of carbon. In 2021, Dorset Council's operation emitted 25,800 tonnes of CO2. So Dorset Council is only directly responsible for 1.56% of the county's carbon emissions. However, we do understand our role across Dorset to lead by example and facilitate and support the rest of the county to take positive action to reduce their carbon footprint, and we take this role very seriously. Dorset Council has applied for and obtained a massive £90 million towards helping our climate change work to support this excellent work in Dorset. And I would like to pass my personal thanks to Councillor Ray Bryan, his team, including Anthony and Wendy, for the particularly good work that they're all doing. So thank you. But the good work continues, and we all need to do what we can to make a change. So please, climate activists, can you target those who make a real difference, the government, and not cost the Dorset taxpayers money that should be spent elsewhere? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Frye. Are we going back to knock? Okay, back to knock. Thank you.
No, not spoken at the beginning.
Yes.
You've spoken. That's fine.
No, okay, thank you. No, we're not hearing any more, I'm afraid. We've done the wrapping ups.
It's a procedural matter.
It's a procedural matter. Would you like to?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I just needed to double check, although I'd asked for it earlier, because we're now at the substantive motion. Do I need to ask again for a recorded vote? I do that then, please.
Doesn't matter.
Over decision.
I'll just shout.
The vote is now open. Okay. Councillor Biggs, could you press your clicker again, please? Chairman, I haven't got your vote. Sorry. Councillor Rennie, I haven't got your vote. Thank you, everyone. The vote's now closed. The result is 47 votes in favour, 21 against, 5 abstentions. The motion is carried.
Thank you, Susan. So, agenda item 15, urgent items. There are no urgent items. Item 16, exempt business. There is no exempt business. So at 21:15, I close the meeting. And wish you all a safe journey home.